story of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks began late in the year 1867, less than 3 years after the last shot was fired in the American Civil War. New York City was the place to be in those days. Manhattan Island, bounded by the Hudson, East, and Harlem rivers, this great metropolis attracted thousands of enterprising young men and women seeking their fame and fortune. Ships would sail in from all parts of the world, each ship often bringing in several hundred passengers and crew members to this land of opportunity. The loading and unloading of cargo and passengers was immense. During this period, large bridges were erected to cross the flowing rivers, like the famed Brooklyn Bridge over the East River, with its construction beginning in 1869. To accommodate the growing number of people, tall buildings were built throughout the city. It was here in this great metropolis, on November 15, 1867, traveled a stranger who had just landed from an English trading vessel from Southampton, England. Singer and songwriter Charles Algernon Sidney Vivian. As described by author Charles Edward Ellis, Vivian, with his winning ways, happy disposition, and infectious good humor, made friends rapidly. Of his first night's work, a New York paper dated November 18, 1867, comments, Charles Vivian, a comic singer from the principal music halls of London, England, made his American debut at Butler's American Theater on the 18th. According to Ellis, in his 1910 book titled An Authentic History of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks, a few members of the theatrical profession in the city of New York formed a gathering of congenial spirits in a sort of club known as the Jolly Corks. Jolly so named for the group's conviviality, and corks for the pieces used in a game or trick played on possible newcomers to the group. This band of good-natured characters would go on to organize a society to promote, protect, and enhance the welfare and happiness of others throughout the country. According to the history of the Order of Elks, at a meeting held on the 2nd of February, 1868, presided over by Charles A. Vivian, George F. MacDonald offered a motion to organize the Jolly Corks as a lodge along benevolent and fraternal lines, and providing that a committee be appointed to formulate rules and regulations for its government, prepare a suitable ritual, and select a new name. Although Vivian suggested they include buffaloes in the new name after a fraternal society in England, the majority were desirous of bestowing a distinctively American title upon the new organization. The elk, an animal fleet of foot, timorous of wrong, but ever ready to combat in the defense of self or the female of the species. Thus, it would be February 16, 1868, that would mark the official beginning of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks. The first charter was granted to New York Lodge No. 1, dated and effective February 12, 1871. Over the several decades following the inception of the organization, communities and leaders around the country learned of the good deeds performed by this group of good deed doers. It would be Warren Harding, an Ohio Republican, elected as the 29th President of the United States from 1921 to 1923, that would be recognized as the first Commander-in-Chief to also hold membership in the Elks. Harding joined the Marion, Ohio Lodge No. 32 in 1890, where he was elected Esteemed Loyal Knight. They were the first lodge to hold an annual circus and parade, earning the nickname the Original Circus Lodge. In his keynote address to the 1916 Republican Convention, as a U.S. Senator, Harding delivered a speech that would one day be echoed again with strikingly similar meaning. In the great fulfillment, we must have a citizen less concerned about what the government can do for it, and more anxious about what it can do for the nation. Harding, on a different matter, when speaking about various elements of the administration during his presidency, was said to have complained to a newspaperman, "I have no trouble with my enemies. I can take care of my enemies all right, but my damn friends, they're the ones that keep me walking the floor nights." Although it was Theodore Roosevelt in 1902 that proposed legislation to protect the elk population in the United States, it would be his nephew, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, affectionately called FDR, who would move the hearts of Elk members around the country when he joined the Poughkeepsie, New York Lodge number 275 in December 1920. In 1931, the Honorable Franklin D. Roosevelt was made an honorary life member of his Poughkeepsie Lodge, his card of which is held at the Presidential Library in Hyde Park, New York. 1 year later, in 1932, FDR was elected as the 32nd President of the United States by a landslide in both the electoral and popular vote. Lodges around the country would look to offer their support. It was on March 4, 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt made his famous inaugural speech heard by tens of millions of Americans.
My friends, this is a day of national consecration, and I am certain that on this day my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency, I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The day after, New York Lodge number 1 writes to the Honorable Man in Office. At the regular session held on Sunday, March 5, 1933, I was directed by unanimous vote of New York Lodge number 1, BPO Elks, to extend its felicitations to you upon assuming the office of President of the United States, and to express the appreciation of our membership for the stirring and inspiring inaugural address delivered on March 4th. Our lodge is confident that a leader has arisen who will guide our country safely through the present raging storm. Your inaugural address has given our people renewed courage, and New York Lodge number 1, the mother lodge of a great and distinctively American fraternity, bids you Godspeed in your heroic battle against odds which no president has ever faced before. Sincerely and fraternally, William T. Phillips, Secretary. 1938, the streets of downtown Wakefield, Rhode Island, were bustling with stylish new automobiles and shoppers making their way to the First National Store, Bell Block stores, and Sheldon's Furniture. This little village was the place to be. That same year, on October 1st, 1938, Rhode Island State College would dedicate buildings in the presence of the nation's First Lady. Seen in this rare film footage is Eleanor Roosevelt at the new Women's Dormitory in Kingston, Rhode Island, named in her honor. Along with her immeasurable contributions to our country, Eleanor Roosevelt would go on to serve the Elks organization as a national judge of the Youth Leadership Contest in 1954, along with Vice President Richard M. Nixon and Director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. Upon the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1945, and during the waning months of World War II, Harry S. Truman would assume the office and serve as the 33rd President of the United States. Truman was a member of the Kansas City, Missouri Lodge, number 26, as is evidenced by his membership card dated the 7th of June, 1934. As written in the History of the Order of Elks, on May 25, 1949, President Truman appealed to the country and asked them to give its young military men the same sort of treatment they would have received if they had stayed at home. Again, he asked the communities near military camps to do for them what you would do in war, adding, "They are your sons and your neighbors' sons, and they are away from home. They need something the armed forces can't give them." It was in that year, 1949, President Harry S. Truman signed into public law designating a special day, June 14th, as Flag Day in America. The decade following again would bring terror to U.S. armed forces as war erupted when North Korea invaded South Korea, after a series of clashes along the border in June 1950. Often called the Forgotten War, despite incurring over 30,000 U.S. casualties, the conflict would linger on and ultimately end in 1953. That same year, a group of citizens in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, would form their own benevolent organization with a purpose to include the supporting of their country. Thousands of men and women serving the armed forces returned to their homes around the country with renewed hope and appreciation for life in America. For those military personnel that stayed in service, little time would pass before another war began, the Vietnam War. As the war in Vietnam progressed, the 1960s rang in with much concern for our country's well-being. On November 8, 1960, Democrat John F. Kennedy became the 35th President of the United States, defeating Republican candidate Richard M. Nixon. The young and handsome John Kennedy would prove to be a leader of undeniable influence. 10 years earlier, in June of 1950, John F. Kennedy had joined the Boston, Massachusetts Elks Lodge No. 10. His contribution to the Elks, this country, and our fellow man are countless. Seen here is Kennedy in July 1961 in a presentation of an Elks Youth Leadership Award in the Oval Office of the White House in Washington, D.C., along with a deserving young woman and the Grand Exalted Ruler of the Elks, John E. Fenton. It was in that same year, 1961, 45 years after Harding delivered his speech, Kennedy delivered his inaugural address with a remarkably similar tone.
I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
As the Vietnam War was coming to an end, another loyal Elk member would accept the position of Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the country's armed forces. Gerald Ford joined the Grand Rapids, Michigan Elks Lodge No. 48 in October of 1952, where his father had served 2 terms as Exalted Ruler. After taking the oath of office at midday on August 9, 1974, President Gerald Ford, speaking to the nation on television, declared an end to the crises of the 1970s, the Vietnam War and oil crisis, stating,
"My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over. Our Constitution works. Our great republic is a government of laws and not of men. Here, the people rule. But there is a higher power. By whatever name, we honor him, who ordains not only righteousness but love, not only justice but mercy."
He served as the 38th President of the United States from 1974 to 1977. Oh yes, there were presidents, generals, entertainers, and national sports figures that were members of the BPOE. But here in southern Rhode Island, our stars were shining bright. In 1953, the town of South Kingstown, Rhode Island, had a population of approximately 11,000 people, and it was growing. Around this time, a group of local men had gathered together to discuss forming a lodge right here in Wakefield. Many of the men were active members of the Westerly, Rhode Island Lodge No. 678. It seemed only practical that with such a vibrant community blossoming in this little corner of the world, they should have their own nearby place to meet, a place where they could organize and plan events that might contribute directly to the betterment of their local community. And so, like many ideas and imaginations, this dream would come true on May 17, 1953. Appearing on the front page of the Narragansett Times just 3 days earlier, before a much-anticipated parade and ceremony, the headline reads, Elks to stage huge affair Sunday when SK Lodge forms. With all the fanfare of a gala event attached to it, the institution of South Kingstown Lodge 1899 into the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks will take place this Sunday in Patsy's Hall, Peacedale. The South Kingstown group will become the 8th lodge in the state to join the national organization. District Deputy Exalted Ruler Leo B. Carey of West Warwick, who will be in charge of the institution, initiation, and installation, said the event will be the biggest ever in the history of elkdom in Rhode Island and one of the biggest in years in New England. Over 700 representatives of various Rhode Island lodges, nearby Connecticut and Massachusetts, and New York and New Jersey lodges will be on hand for the ceremonies. The Times would write, "A street parade from the post office in Wakefield to Peacedale will precede the exercises in Patsy's Hall." Outfits of all kinds were adorned by both men and women participating in this grand display of community. Other bands and delegations attended from Providence, Newport, Westerly, Woonsocket, Pawtucket, West Warwick, and Warren lodges, as well as smaller groups from other lodges. In the background, one can see the Wakefield Post Office, Phil Watson's Delicatessen, and South County Records. Here on the hill at Orchard Avenue, a group of over 100 men prepare to step off to begin what for many would be a lifelong dedication of service to their community. Dressed in their fine attire were local teachers, lawyers, bankers, postmen, along with many other professions represented that were deeply rooted in the town's activities and concerns. The South Kingstown High School drum majorettes would take their place in front of the group of men. Veterans groups formed along Robinson Street next to the Wakefield Branch Planing Mill. With the outside ranks at attention and the flag bearers at parade rest, the march was ready to start. As the procession kicked off from Robinson Street, hundreds would follow west on Main Street towards High Street to the Peacedale Flats, with a destination of Patsy's Hall for the ceremonies. Here at Patsy's Hall is Danny Pusella, now retired captain of the South Kingstown Police Department and the only surviving charter member in 2018. Standing next to Danny is Sebastian Sabby Reese, along with Walter McNulty and J. Arthur Roy. Years earlier, in a 1938 film called It's a Holiday, Walter McNulty, the first police chief for the town of South Kingstown, is seen directing traffic along Main Street in Wakefield. James Pop Conlon, the high school principal, is also pictured at the ceremony. And in that same film, we see Pop congratulating another accomplished charter member, 1937 South Kingstown High School class valedictorian, Alfred Gadrow. Although the actual installation ceremony was held at Patsy's Hall, an area large enough to capture a picture of the whole group of 143 new charter members was needed. Across the flats was just the place. Built in 1921, Fagan's Opera House, otherwise known as the Peacedale Theater, stood just a stone's throw away from Patsy's Hall. According to Oliver Stedman in his book A Stroll Through Memory Lane, Fagan's Opera House was a scene of fine moving pictures, community dances, fairs held by various organizations, baseball and football clubs, and firemen. It was also the place for many seasons where the champion South Kingstown basketball teams held their home games. This was the perfect place to take a group photo of such a grand gathering of fine gentlemen on the basketball court at Fagan's Opera House. Far too many names to mention them all, 143 to be exact. We highlight just a few from the photo for the legacies holding membership in 2018, 65 years after their charter member fathers or grandfathers joined the Elks. Sitting in the front row is charter member Danny Pusella, retired captain, South Kingstown Police Department. In 2017, at age 94, Danny shares a little pride in the village he was raised.
Daniel Pusella, November 25th, 1923, makes me 93. Working on 94. I was born on a Peacedale flat, and I grew up in Rocky Brook, which is what they call Peacedale now.
Luke Pasella, Danny's father, was an accomplished musician and played the trombone in the Wakefield band. Carolyn Pasella Brown, Danny's younger sister and daughter to Luke, is also a member of the lodge today. Walter McNulty, the first police chief in South Kingstown, father to Marilyn McNulty Hamilton, who joined the Elks in 2017. Thomas R. Doherty, first exalted ruler of Lodge 1899, father to Kathy Doherty Davis and Thomas R. Doherty, Jr. Alphonse Calitri, founder of Anchor Dairy Bar, father to Al Calitri, Jr., past exalted ruler, and father to Barbara Calitri Jennings, past Lodge treasurer. Frank F. Palmisano, Jr., founder of Iggy Palmisano's Restaurant, father to Marcia Palmisano Christensen, grandfather to Scott E. Christensen. Alfred L. Gadro, public accountant, father to A. Victor Gadro. Kenneth G. Gallup, founder of Rhode Island Engine Company, father to Kenneth G. Gallup, Jr. W. Murray Gates, Jr., owner of Wakefield Auto Station, grandfather to David Gates. Wesley R. Lassard, Jr., founder of Taste Right Foods, father to Wes Lassard. Henry B. Mello, Jr., captain of fishing boat the Lucy M., father to James E. Mello and grandfather to James E. Mello, Jr. Joseph P. Rose, owner of Millstream Laundry, father to John Rose. Louis B. Schaefer, founder of Schaefer Sand and Gravel, father to Mary Ann Schaefer Sherman and grandfather to Elwood D. Sherman, Jr. John Stadnick, butcher at the First National Store, father to Richard Stadnick, Sr., past Lodge treasurer. Alfred F. Terminisi, owner of Terminisi's Restaurant, father to Albert F. Rick Terminisi. John Toth, Wakefield and Narragansett postman, father to James M. Toth. Charter members, of which legacies hold membership in 2018, that are not present in the photo are Sidney F. Tucker, Jr., owner of Sidney Tucker and Sons Plumbing and Heating, father to Sidney F. Tucker III, and Everett Sykes, banker at the Wakefield Trust Company on Main Street, and third exalted ruler, father to Rodman Sykes and Nancy Sykes Steinmeier. With this incredible group of charter members, the team would be led by Thomas R. Doherty, a man with considerable motivation. Holding previous membership in the Elks and demitting along with 22 others from the Westerly Lodge to form South Kingstown Lodge 1899, Doherty would emerge as a strong leader. Seen here is Tom Doherty being congratulated by District Deputy Grand Exalted Ruler Leo B. Carey of West Warwick, as he is installed as Exalted Ruler of the new lodge. Among the gifts received was a flag, which is flown over the nation's capital in Washington, and was given to the lodge by Congressman John E. Fogarty. The following week, on May 21, 1953, a Narragansett Times article captures 4 officers representing the newly established lodge. They are John W. Hopkins, Loyal Knight; Thomas R. Doherty, First Exalted Ruler; Dr. S. J. P. Turco, Leading Knight; and Harold A. Whiting, Lecturing Knight. Together in a gathering of 143 men, this band of brothers has been installed into one of the most respected humanitarian organizations in the United States. According to the Times, in his acceptance speech at the ceremony, Doherty said the first objective of South Kingstown Lodge would be to acquire property for a new Elks home, and that several places were being considered. He named Dr. Turco as chairman of the building committee. 1 year later, on May 16, 1954, a writer for the Providence Sunday Journal wrote of the news that Lodge 1899 had their new home. Frank Lanning, noted artist and sports cartoonist, would later capture Tom Doherty's indomitable spirit and character in his sketches. In a future article in the Bulletin, some of Doherty's achievements would be described. He was the Dean of New England Sports Information Directors and the drumbeater of the University of Rhode Island for nearly 30 years. He made a major contribution to his community, serving as president of the South Kingstown Town Council and chairman of the school committee. Twice he was exalted ruler of the South Kingstown Elks and the district deputy, and president of Words Unlimited for 13 years. Ours is an Elks home that doesn't look like one, a member of the South Kingstown Lodge of Elks told a visiting brother as he began a tour of the new home at 56 Main Street, Wakefield, on a recent afternoon. An hour later, sitting before a fireplace in the mahogany paneled library, the guest said, "It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen." His comment is typical of those by brothers from all over New England who have visited Deepwell, former residence of Mr. and Mrs. William Davis Miller. The name Deepwell was chosen by the Millers because of the artesian well in the courtyard. The Elks used the library for cards, TV, reading, and other social activities. Left to right is Charles Hall, William Sandrelli, Arthur B. Carpenter Jr., and B. Frank Sims. In another room was a billiard table. Seen here shooting is Colonel Thomas Marsden, and to his right, Frank Gallo, James Forbes, Albert Pollock, Anthony Yema, and Louis Martella. There was plenty to do fixing the mansion up for the new lodge, and this labor of love was just what the doctor ordered for this tight-knit group of friends and community leaders. Ascending a spiral staircase is our second exalted ruler, Dr. S.J.P. Turco. As legend would be told, there was another secret stairway to the second floor that opened from a panel in the wall. The new bar was built by members in the former kitchen and pantry. On the job at left, Colonel Marsden steps up to the challenge. To his right, Oliver Johnson, John Yema, Harold Gould, Frank Gallo, and Anthony Yema all contribute to the renovations. In the dining and living room, formal meetings were held. Left to right is Marshall Yema, Tom Doherty, immediate past exalted ruler, Ray Yema, Arthur Carpenter Jr., and Frank Fagan. This was the Elks mansion home, with a function hall that once served as the garage for the previous owners and 11 acres of land, all nestled in the heart of Wakefield, Rhode Island. Harry Truman once said, "Men make history and not the other way around." In periods where there is no leadership, society stands still. Progress occurs when courageous, skillful leaders seize the opportunity to change things for the better. This quote by Truman can surely be affirmed as the early leaders of Lodge 1899 formed the fabric by which they would guide the membership over the next decade. Much of what we know today about our history is only known because of individuals that have passed along some documentation of that time gone by. It was charter member Everett R. Sykes, whose passion to serve his community and care to maintain a record of those early happenings, that allows us to reflect upon the past and learn from those that came before us. Serving as the third exalted ruler of the Lodge from 1955 to 1956, he was instrumental in establishing a firm footing on which the Elks Lodge would continue to build their membership and perpetuate the ideals of community service. At left is the esteemed loyal knight Archibald Kenyon, who would go on to serve as the fifth exalted ruler, and at right, Esquire Alfred Fortin Sr., who would go on to be the sixth exalted ruler. Everett's involvement was evident and seen in all aspects of lodge activities. One of the events held annually was the good old-fashioned South County clam bake. This photo, taken in 1955, was published in the Elks magazine that same year with a caption that reads, "The 73-year-old steam pumper of Narragansett Fire Department was a big attraction at the annual South Kingstown, Rhode Island Lodge clam bake. The ancient engine, in perfect working order, has been retired from service to be used very successfully in preparing the seafood for clam bakes, as 275 South Kingstown Elks can testify. At left, Exalted Ruler Everett R. Sykes looks on as co-chairman George Ritano checks the steam pressure. At right is Fred Folcarelli, assistant chef. In this photo, Everett appears with Gunnar Carlson as they recognize the South Kingstown High School Youth Leadership Contest winners. Another staff photo shows him adjusting the baseball cap of 8-year-old Billy Racker of Peacedale. According to the article, shirts and caps were presented yesterday to 48 youngsters unable to participate in the regular schedule of the crowded South County Little League. The Journal writes, Wakefield Explorer Scouts are presented their charter Sunday at 1 p.m. at the South Kingstown Elks grounds during the Lodge's observance of National Elks Youth Day. Numerous articles and photos would continue to appear in local newspapers, showing the organization's involvement in the community. As tradition goes, this dedicated exalted ruler and outgoing leader, Everett Rodman Sykes, would pass the gavel to the incoming exalted ruler, Reggie Sassy. For almost 30 years, events of all kinds were held on the grounds at the west end of Main Street, just below Sugarloaf Hill. One traditional gathering held each year in June was the annual Flag Day celebration. First adopted in 1907 at Grand Lodge in Philadelphia, Flag Day was a ceremony dedicated to patriotic service, seeking to promote a proper knowledge of and respect for the American flag and all that it represents. In this Narragansett Times article dated June 1955, the Elks invite public to honor Flag Day. A colorful program has been arranged to include the story of the evolution of the flag through its 6 phases up to the present Stars and Stripes. Under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Daniel A. McDonald, Commandant of the ROTC at URI, 6 members of the Elks-sponsored Explorer Troop will take part in the presentation. These must have been grand times as the bands played on, while all in attendance watched the American flag being raised. Dignitaries would often take part and give thanks to the thousands of brave soldiers that fought so gallantly to preserve our freedoms. And Deepwell, the majestic mansion, once owned by noted author and naval officer William Davis Miller, was a perfect setting for each occasion. Another annual event was the Children's Easter Egg Hunt, seen here on a page in the Evening Bulletin dated Tuesday, April 3, 1956. Children are fascinated and eager to search for the 320 Easter eggs hidden throughout the grounds. Pictured and standing proudly with arm raised high is one local Wakefield boy with a caption, "I got one," shouts Jackie Menahan. Children and their happiness, health, and welfare have always been important to the Elks. It was President Roosevelt who in 1938 founded the March of Dimes, a nonprofit organization that works to improve the health of mothers and babies by preventing birth defects, premature birth, and infant mortality. It was in March 1958 that a photo appeared in the National Elks magazine with 3 of our own. The caption reads, "The Jolly Chefs of South Kingstown, Rhode Island Lodge donated a wide variety of tasty dishes to the March of Dimes food sale." Manning the table are left to right, Howard E. Ritano, Alfred Folcarelli, and George A. Ritano. The first issue of the Elks magazine was actually published in June 1922. Just a year prior, at the Grand Lodge session in Los Angeles, the National Memorial Headquarters Commission incorporated the following in its report. In the opinion of your committee, the order has grown to such proportions and has established itself as so important a part of the fraternal and patriotic life of the country that the time arrived when the publication of a national journal is not only a desirable feature of its activities, but a real necessity to the full fruitage of those activities. Such a journal should be a real magazine of the highest excellence, both in physical makeup and literary contents, one which can compare favorably with the best publications in the country. In this undated Narragansett Times photo, Gaetano Guy Marzilli, exalted ruler from 1959 to 1960, is seen with Earl Fenstermaker, the exalted ruler at the time of the photo, thanking Commander John Curatola of South Kingstown, VFW, Post 916, and Ed Gardner Wright, for participating in the Elks Flag Day program. Others holding the exalted ruler position in the 1960s were James Folcarelli, Joseph Gilchrist, Joseph Lafreniere, Alfred Luzon, and Douglas Sherman. Sherman would go on to serve in this leadership position 3 times in 3 different decades, first in 1969 to 1970, then again in 1984 and 1987. Here, Sherman is seen as he is installed into the Lodge's highest position. Installing officer and past exalted ruler Reggie Sassy performs the induction and presents him with the jewels of his office. A man with an untiring commitment to community service, E.R. Douglas Sherman would dedicate his life to ensuring that others succeed. Again, Sherman is seen as he presents an award to local Star Scout Bradley Heiling. The award, a 2-week camping trip to the National Boy Scout Jamboree at Farragut Park, Idaho. And here, he congratulates Alfred Freddie Folcarelli with the Elk of the Year award. As described in a news release, the annual award is made on the basis of a member's contribution of time and effort in behalf of the membership during the past 12 months. At another awards banquet, Louis Barbera, who would go on to serve as exalted ruler in 1973, presents a gift to Douglas Sherman for his unwavering devotion to Lodge 1899. As the decades rolled on, we would see the traditionalist or silent generation pass its torch of light onto those citizens of the post-World War II baby boomer generation. As we saw earlier with President Kennedy's presentation to winners of the Youth Leadership Contest Awards at the White House in 1961, it would be South Kingstown Lodge 1899 that would nominate one of its own young achievers to the state. Seen here in this 1974 photo with Rhode Island Lieutenant Governor Joseph Garrahy is Scott Whaley of South Kingstown, as he is recognized for his achievements in the Rhode Island Youth Leadership Contest. The letter from Grand Lodge reads, "Dear Mr. Whaley, I wish to express my sincere best wishes to you and my congratulations on winning first place in our Youth Leadership Contest. You and your parents should be justly proud of this accomplishment. The Elks are grateful that we were able to be a part of this happy occasion. Sincerely and fraternally, Robert A. Yothers, Grand Exalted Ruler." The exalted rulers leading the lodge during the 1970s were Robert Adams, Floyd Smith, Alfred St. Ange, Louis Barbera, Walter D. Cattell Jr., Clinton Holland, George Vaughn, Russell Whaley, Walter Pike, and Ernest Downs. Seen here in this photo taken in 1972 are several members supporting their newly installed exalted ruler, Alfred St. Ange. Sitting at left next to exalted ruler St. Ange is Walter Cattell, who would go on to serve as exalted ruler in 1974 and 1975. Along with holding numerous state and regional positions, Walter D. Cattell Jr. would serve as a national deputy director to the Grand Exalted Ruler and as a national director of the Elks Hoop Shoot program. For his untiring efforts and countless contributions, Lodge 1899 would later, in June of 2017, dedicate the banquet room in his honor as the Walter Dewey Cattell Jr. Hall. The next several years following the 70s would prove to be a pivotal time for Lodge 1899 as the country was experiencing its own challenges, In 1981, Ronald Wilson Reagan would be elected to serve as the 40th President of the United States. At this time, the American economy was suffering through a deep recession, while here in South Kingstown, leaders continued with keeping the Elks true to their cause of contributing to the betterment of the community. Exalted rulers in the 1980s that had not served previously were Walter Ryan, Raymond Brown, Alfred Diana, John Foreman IV, Daniel Watson, Robert Carpinelli, and Alphonse Calitri. As time marched on, along with normal wear and tear and the increasing cost to maintain the old Miller house, the search was on for a more practical home. According to an article published in the Narragansett Times on Thursday, November 13, 1986, the local Elks Order is seeking 3 to 5 acres in South Kingstown, Narragansett area to house a new facility. The group's current lodge, located on Main Street, Wakefield, has been sold, and the Elks must vacate it by April 1, 1987. Efforts to find a new home have been unsuccessful thus far, according to Wesley C. Lassard, a trustee. Numerous locations were considered from Main Street to Route 1 to Route 108 near the newly constructed police station, but none were deemed suitable. It would be several months before the Elks would ultimately find their place, for after several discussions with the new owner of what had been the Elks' home for over 32 years, an agreement was made between the two parties to carve out a piece of land on the northeast side of the overall property along Belmont Avenue, roughly 3 acres. On this parcel of land stood an old barn-like structure that had been used for functions in the past, but now would be converted into a makeshift clubhouse. It was simply called the Hall. Built solidly, likely sometime in the early 1900s, these quarters would stand for 10 years while members continued to provide service to their community. Although the lodge had experienced a challenging time in the late 1980s, negotiating the coordination of a physical move, the spirit of charity, justice, brotherly love, and fidelity would keep the organization moving forward with steadfast determination, reflecting the national momentum. President Reagan's address at the 1988 Elks National Convention would further motivate Elks around the country to continue their service. Of course, there were many events held on the grounds in and around the old hall, but certainly one of the most favored events of all, again, was the old-fashioned South County clam bake that began in the early days of the lodge. Seen here around 1993 is Danny Watson, past exalted ruler, cooking at the grill. Danny's contributions to Lodge 1899 were immeasurable and will long be remembered. Preparing for a clam bake was a special occasion in itself. Wooden box-like crates filled with potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn on the cob, steamers, lobsters, and other delights were placed between hot rocks and wet seaweed underneath a large canvas until cooked to perfection. Then the boxes were lined up on a table for all attendees to make their choices. The exalted rulers leading the lodge during the 1990s that had not been ERs in the past were John Choquette, Raymond Ells, John Carpinelli Jr., Elwood Sherman Sr., Peter Sullivan, Walter Amryan, Ellis Kitchen, David Bueniscus, and Richard Hurley. It was in September of 1992, and under the leadership of exalted ruler Ray Ells, committee chairperson Dick Albright, and Bob Conley, an event was held to raise funds for a young boy from Narragansett who had suffered a tragic loss when he lost both his eyes to cancer. The Narragansett Times headline reads, "Area embraces victims of tragedy. Elks Lodge dinner raises $10,000 for Pierre Toddler." Just a few years later, around 1995, the Elks purchased a Braille machine and presented it to the young boy. Again, Lodge 1899's commitment to country was ever faithful, and their devotion and dedication to the Stars and Stripes unwavering. seen here in 1995, is another Flag Day celebration. From left to right standing is John Bannister, Esquire, along with past exalted rulers Walter Amryan, Peter Sullivan, Ellis Kitchen, John Carpinelli, Alfred Luzon, and Bob Carpinelli. In 1998, with the new building just complete, the organization now had 6,800 square feet of space on one floor. Built with a steel frame, central air conditioning, and a state-of-the-art kitchen, the new building would allow the volunteers to continue serving their community faithfully. Those exalted rulers that would lead Lodge 1899 from the year 2000 through 2018 that had not served in the position in prior years were Alfred Madison Jr., J. Almonte, Audrey Amryan. Audrey Amryan would hold the distinction of being the first female exalted ruler for the South Kingstown Lodge. Peter Seifert, Sr., Vincent Aliamiello, Jr., Jeff Robert. Exalted Ruler Robert would be just one of two members that would serve in this highest position 3 times, in company with E.R. Douglas Sherman, R.G. Billings, Cheryl Anderson, Peter Anderson, Henry Baker Jr., Bill DeCesare Jr., Ed Dwyer, Mary Atzer, and the present exalted ruler, Deborah Watterson. It is through their leadership and the talents of so many others, and the giving of countless hours to serving their fellow men and women, that has guided Lodge 1899 to where it is today. This capsule of captured moments may be just a split second in time, but it is who we are. It is what we do for others, whether serving as Elks or giving outside of the organization, that will surely be our most valuable contribution to humanity. To many, the Elks organization has been a lifelong relationship. As we have learned, this fraternal order was founded to promote and practice the 4 cardinal virtues of charity, justice, brotherly love, and fidelity, and to promote the welfare and happiness of mankind, to uphold our country and its laws, and to quicken the spirit of American patriotism. These virtues are forever a part of the Elks being, and are seen clearly at the Elks National Memorial in Chicago, Illinois. Construction of the Elks National Memorial began in 1923, after the order unanimously agreed on a spacious site for the building, looking out over Chicago's Lincoln Park and within a stone's throw of Lake Michigan. The memorial was completed in 1926. It is further noted in the memorial history, the Elks National Memorial is a tribute to the bravery, loyalty, and dedication to the thousands of Elks who have fought and died for our country. It has been described as one of the most magnificent war memorials in the world, but with its monumental architecture and priceless art, the memorial is more of a symbol of peace and of the patriotism of the members of the Elks fraternity. It is here that we ventured in 2017 to learn from those that have come before us, and together with our fellow Elk, Gigi and I share the experiences which will forever be a part of our lives. For over 150 years, beginning in 1867, with Charles Vivian's entrance onto the theatrical stages of New York City, to our present day in May 2018, we celebrate our continued service to God, our country, and our fellow man. May these moments in time be treasured for the goodwill shared by us among our peers and the community in which we live and breathe. In celebration of the 150th birthday of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks, and the 65th birthday of our own South Kingstown Elks Lodge number 1899, we introduce to you the second part of our time capsule anniversary film. This is the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks, South Kingstown Lodge number 1899.
There's a bunch of good fellows who banded together, they're known throughout the land. And to thousands of folks who are down on their luck, they have lent a helping hand. The Order of Elks are the men that I mean, and their motto is sweet charity. Their emblem's the head of an elk on a button with 4 letters, B-P-O-E. They are the best people on earth. B-P-O-E. They are the people who do the most good. When you're an elk, you will see what they'll do for you. We never will know the half of that charity. Good fellows together in all sorts of weather. The B-P-O-E. At my initiation into the Elks Lodge, I was simply treated grand. Every brother was there with an Indian club to give me a helping hand. I woke up at the doctor's, he thought I'd been hit by an automobile on the head. When I told him I'd merely been joining the Elks, then he smiled at me sweetly and said, they are the best people on earth. B-P-O-E. They are the folks who do everyone good. Now you're an elk, you can see what they do.